I'm Olivia Bennett, 36 years old, and I used to believe my family was the kind you see on the covers of lifestyle magazines, poised, polished, and perpetually put together. We lived in a stately colonial house in Ashfield, Massachusetts, where autumn leaves blanketed the lawn like a scene from a postcard, and Christmas lights twinkled every winter with practiced perfection. My father, Robert Bennett, was the neighborhood's respected insurance broker, always ready with a firm handshake and a reassuring smile. My mother, Evelyn, played the part of the gracious hostess to perfection, her laughter ringing through rooms she kept spotless, and her hands always busy arranging fresh flowers in heirloom vases. And then there was Henry, my older brother, who carried the family's golden child legacy on his broad shoulders and easy smile. At every dinner party and holiday gathering, his accomplishments sparkled under the bright kitchen lights, his athletic triumphs, his new business ventures, his effortless charm. I was the quiet one, the one who found solace in dusty books and numbers that always made sense. My path was never paved in trophies or applause. It was lined with silent victories and long hours spent working for the future I hoped to build far beyond the confines of our family's curated perfection. And though I grew up feeling like a footnote in my own home, there was one person who saw beyond the carefully staged family portraits and the polite conversations that always seemed to stop just short of the truth: my grandmother, Matilda. Grandma Matilda was a woman of quiet power and boundless curiosity. She had been a librarian for over 40 years, a keeper of stories and secrets, and the person who first taught me that knowledge was the greatest inheritance I could ever receive. We would spend entire afternoons in her sunlit living room, me curled up at her feet, listening as she shared stories of women who had come before us, women who had built lives of their own despite every obstacle, who had learned to guard what was theirs in a world that too often told them it belonged to someone else. It was during one of those afternoons that she first took my hand and said something that would change everything. Olivia, one day, this will all be yours. Not because you're my granddaughter, but because you're the only one who truly understands what it means. I didn't fully grasp the weight of her words then, but I felt their power. In a family that measured worth in appearances, Grandma taught me to find value in the quiet spaces no one else could see. That promise would become the anchor I clung to when everything else fell away, a beacon in the darkness I didn't yet know was coming. I carried Grandma Matilda's promise with me like a talisman, a secret shield against the quiet dismissal I'd grown used to in my family. When I moved to Boston to pursue a career in financial analysis, her voice was always there, echoing in my mind. You're the only one who truly understands what this means. My parents pretended to support me, but I could feel their indifference in every polite nod when I mentioned my work or my dreams. For them, the measure of success was the same polished image they'd always clung to. Henry, with his endless charm and easy confidence, never had to prove himself. His future was assured because he fit the mold they'd built for him. But me, my place was always negotiable, or so they thought. In the quiet of my apartment in the city, I pored over spreadsheets and balance sheets by day, while at night I kept Grandma's words close. She'd spent her life proving that even the smallest salary carefully tended could grow into something enduring. She'd built her own legacy not through flash or bravado, but through patient, meticulous care qualities she saw in me, even when no one else bothered to look. When I visited her on weekends, the two of us would sit together in her sunlit kitchen, her voice low and firm as she explained her records, her investments, the safe places she'd hidden away her hard-earned security. I want you to know it all, she'd say, because someday you'll need to be ready. I didn't realize then how true her words would become. When Grandma Matilda passed, the world I'd known as a child cracked open, and the polite illusions of family unity were replaced by something colder, sharper. My parents and Henry wasted no time. Even before the funeral was over, they were discussing how to handle Grandma's estate, how to divide, sell, and claim what they saw as their rightful share. I watched from the sidelines as they moved through her house, like they were at an estate sale, debating the price of every item, the value of every memory. The sapphire brooch Grandma had once pressed into my palm was nowhere in sight. The ledgers she'd spent decades filling with careful, loving notes were dismissed as confused old woman's nonsense. Every protest I raised was met with the same patronizing smile. Olivia, you're just being sentimental. But I knew better. Grandma's voice was louder than their dismissals. She'd made me her confidant for a reason. She'd shown me where to find the evidence of her wishes, the accounts she'd made me a part of, the letters she'd written, explaining it all. In the days after her death, I went back to those papers like a pilgrim seeking absolution. In the margins of bank statements, she'd scribbled notes only I understood, reminders of the quiet strength she'd passed down to me. In the last letter she'd left in her desk drawer, she wrote, "Olivia, never let anyone tell you that you don't deserve what's yours." Meanwhile, Henry and my parents began to spin their own version of the story. They said Grandma had grown forgetful, that she hadn't really meant for everything to go to me. My father called it family unity, my mother called it fairness, and Henry, ever the golden child, said it was what Grandma would have wanted. But I could see the fear in their eyes whenever I mentioned the accounts I knew about the signatures that named me as joint owner, the letters that laid out Grandma's plan in her own unmistakable script. Their denial didn't deter me, it only hardened my resolve. I wasn't just fighting for an inheritance. I was fighting for the truth of who Grandma Matilda was and what she'd spent her life building. I was fighting for every woman who had been told to be quiet, to be grateful for whatever scraps were offered. And so with every document I found, every piece of evidence I gathered, I felt her presence beside me, as if she were reminding me that even in death, she was still here, still guiding me, still trusting me to honor her wishes. Now I'm sharing this story with you because I believe there's power in speaking the truth, even when others try to bury it. Have you ever been forced to stand alone to defend what was rightfully yours in the face of family betrayal? Have you ever felt the weight of fighting for something no one else believes you deserve? I want to hear your story in the comments. Let's build a space where voices like ours are heard. And don't forget to subscribe. Your support helps me keep sharing these stories of resilience and quiet rebellion. Join our community today, share your voice, inspire others, and help us grow together with every single story shared here. I refuse to let their dismissive smiles or the carefully chosen words they threw at me dull the edge of what I knew was true. Grandma Matilda had given me everything she had, not because of some sentimental impulse, but because she believed in me, and I would honor that belief no matter what it cost me. So while Henry and my parents gathered in hushed conversations in the old dining room, divvying up furniture and heirlooms as if they were chips at a poker table, I gathered my own arsenal. Every document Grandma had ever shared with me, every bank statement, every insurance policy, every note scrawled in the margins of her ledgers. I cataloged them all with the same quiet precision she'd once taught me. In the weeks that followed her funeral, my family moved quickly to claim what they believed was theirs. They transferred funds from accounts I knew Grandma had set aside for me. They began selling pieces of her jewelry to pay off debts they'd long hidden behind polite smiles and perfectly curated social media posts. My mother wore Grandma's sapphire necklace to Sunday service, as if it had always belonged to her, and Henry drove around in a brand new SUV. He bragged was a well-deserved upgrade, never once acknowledging that it was bought with money Grandma had intended for me. I watched it all unfold from the sidelines, at first stunned by the brazenness of their betrayal. But the shock quickly turned to something sharper, a cold, clear fury that made me more determined than ever. I reached out to the banks where Grandma had kept her savings, speaking in the measured tones of a financial analyst who had spent years learning exactly how these things worked. I asked questions that made the polite customer service voices on the other end of the phone pause, recalibrate, and then start offering real answers. I discovered that the accounts were meant to transfer to me automatically, no probate, no court battles. Just a simple line of text naming me as the surviving joint owner. But that simple truth was something my family had tried to bury under their half-truths and denials. They'd used a power of attorney that had expired the moment Grandma took her last breath, forging signatures and rushing to strip every asset bare before I could claim my rightful place. Each new piece of evidence I uncovered made their betrayal feel both more monstrous and more fragile, like a web of lies ready to snap under the weight of real truth. I hired an attorney who specialized in estate disputes, a woman named Ms. Rivera, with eyes like a hawk and a voice that cut through the polite nonsense my family had tried to feed me. She reviewed everything I had gathered, her brow furrowing deeper with every page she turned. They knew exactly what they were doing, she told me. But so did your grandmother. She left you more than money, Olivia. She left you a path forward, and we're going to follow it. Armed with Ms. Rivera's quiet confidence and my own unwavering resolve, I pressed forward. We contacted the banks, presented the evidence of forged signatures and invalid transfers, and watched as account after account was frozen, the funds no longer accessible to the family members who had once laughed at my supposed naivety. Each call I made, each meeting I sat through, I felt Grandma Matilda's presence beside me, like a silent witness to the strength she'd always known was there. But it wasn't just the financial battles that weighed on me. It was the way my family looked at me now, as if I had become the villain in the story they were writing. My mother's cold silences, my father's dismissive shrugs, Henry's smug half-smiles that faltered when I refused to back down. It hurt more than I wanted to admit, but I reminded myself every night as I reviewed the stacks of evidence on my kitchen table, I was fighting for something bigger than their approval. I was fighting for the memory of a woman who had taught me to never let anyone else define my worth. The night before I confronted them, I sat in my small Boston apartment, the city lights casting long shadows on the walls, and read the final letter Grandma had left for me. In it, she wrote, "You will face them, Olivia, and you will do it with grace and strength, because you are my granddaughter and you are ready." Her words were a balm and a battle cry, and as I closed my eyes, I felt the weight of her legacy settle on my shoulders like a mantle I was finally ready to wear. I'm sharing this with you because I believe every voice that speaks the truth chips away at the lies. Have you ever had to stand alone to hold fast to what you knew was right, even when everyone around you said you were wrong? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your stories. Let's build a space for those of us who refuse to be silenced, and don't forget to subscribe. Your voice helps me keep sharing these truths. The day of the confrontation arrived like the crack of a thunderstorm on a clear summer afternoon. I had prepared meticulously, each document carefully organized, each fact checked and rechecked, until it glowed with certainty. Ms. Rivera stood by my side like a silent sentinel, her quiet confidence steadying me as we walked up the front steps of my parents' house in Ashfield, a place that once felt like home, but now felt like a fortress I had to storm to reclaim what was rightfully mine. The door opened to my mother's carefully practiced smile, the same one she'd worn at countless dinner parties and community fundraisers. "Olivia, dear, come in," she said, her voice honey-sweet and cold beneath the surface. I stepped inside past the polished floors and carefully arranged family portraits, each one now a testament to the illusion they had tried so hard to preserve. Henry was already there, lounging in the living room, like he owned it, his expensive watch glinting in the lamplight as he scrolled through his phone. My father sat in his favorite armchair, his expression calm and unreadable, as if he were about to negotiate an insurance claim rather than face the consequences of his own deception. My mother motioned for me to sit, but I remained standing, feeling the weight of every moment that had led to this. I took a breath, steadying my voice. "I'm here because this ends today," I said, and the room fell silent. I laid the documents on the coffee table, one by one, bank statements, letters from Grandma, evidence of forged signatures and invalid transfers. I watched as their faces shifted from mild amusement to discomfort, to a cold, simmering anger that told me they knew the game was up. Henry opened his mouth to protest, but Ms. Rivera raised her hand calmly. "We're not here to argue," she said. "We're here to resolve this with the truth that Olivia has so painstakingly uncovered." My father's jaw tightened. "Olivia, you don't understand the pressures we've been under." He began, his voice that careful blend of authority and condescension he'd perfected over the years. But I didn't flinch. "I understand perfectly," I replied. "I understand that you took what didn't belong to you and tried to erase the wishes of the one person who always believed in me." My mother looked away, her fingers twisting the hem of her cardigan. "We thought we were doing what was best for the family," she said softly, but there was no conviction in her voice anymore. Henry's eyes narrowed. "You're just being difficult, Olivia. Grandma would have wanted us to have these things. You're the one making this ugly." I felt the words like a slap, but I didn't let them sink in. "No," I said firmly. "I'm the one making sure her wishes are honored. I'm the one making sure she isn't erased from the history of this family." Ms. Rivera took over, then her calm professionalism slicing through the tension like a scalpel. She laid out the legal reality, each point irrefutable, each fact a nail in the coffin of their carefully constructed narrative. My father tried to bluster my mother to placate, but the weight of the truth was too heavy to ignore. Henry sat back, his face hardening as he realized that this was not going to end the way he'd always assumed it would, with him on top me in the shadows. As the minutes passed, I watched the foundation of their lies crack and crumble, watched the pride and entitlement in their eyes give way to something like fear. When it was over, Mrs. Rivera closed her folder and looked at me. "The choice is yours, Olivia," she said. "You can pursue this in court and make it public, or you can negotiate a private settlement that acknowledges the truth." I turned to my parents, to the brother who had never seen me as an equal. "I want an accounting of everything I said, every piece of jewelry, every dollar, every item that belonged to Grandma Matilda. And I want it in writing that you admit what you did." My father's shoulders slumped, the fight gone from his eyes. "We'll do it," he said hoarsely. My mother's lips trembled as she whispered, "I'm sorry." But I didn't respond. Not yet. The apology meant nothing until the actions matched the words. As I walked out of that house, the late afternoon sun slanting through the trees, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, a weight I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying for years. This wasn't just about money or heirlooms. It was about reclaiming the truth, about refusing to let anyone rewrite the story of who Grandma Matilda was and what she had chosen to leave behind. That day, I didn't just walk away with documents or promises. I walked away with something far more powerful, the knowledge that I had the strength to stand alone, and that sometimes that's all you need to start building something new. The days after that confrontation were a whirlwind of legal paperwork and hushed negotiations, but beneath the surface of contracts and signatures, something else was shifting, a quiet reclamation of the story that had almost been taken from me. My parents signed the settlement agreement, returning Grandma Matilda's jewelry collection and offering monthly payments for the fair market value of her house, which they had sold without my knowledge or consent. Each time a payment arrived, each time I opened the velvet boxes containing the heirlooms she'd once shown me with such pride, it felt like another piece of her voice was being restored. The sapphire brooch that she'd pressed into my hand when I was 26, the delicate string of pearls she wore to every family gathering, these weren't just trinkets. They were pieces of a legacy that my family had tried to erase, and now they were back where they belonged. Yet even as the legal dust settled, the emotional fallout was just beginning. My mother reached out a few weeks later, with tentative texts, soft invitations to Sunday dinners, or quick updates about Henry's children, as if hoping that polite small talk could rebuild what had been broken. My father, ever the pragmatist, kept his communication strictly to the details of the settlement. His emails crisp and professional, with no hint of the father who had once read bedtime stories in that same living room, now overshadowed by betrayal. Henry didn't reach out at all. His silence was as final as the contracts we'd signed. In the quiet of my Boston apartment, I allowed myself to grieve not just for the grandmother I had lost, but for the family I thought I had. I remembered those childhood evenings when the house was filled with laughter and the smell of cinnamon from Grandma's kitchen, when I still believed that family meant safety and trust. Now I saw those memories through a new lens, understanding how easily love could be used as a weapon, how quickly the people closest to you could become strangers. But even in the middle of that grief, there was a sense of relief. No more pretending, no more playing the part of the good daughter who stayed quiet to keep the peace. I had fought for what was mine, and in doing so, I had reclaimed not just Grandma's inheritance, but a piece of myself I'd almost forgotten. The Olivia who had once doubted her worth was gone, replaced by someone who understood that real strength doesn't come from others' approval. It comes from standing your ground when everyone else expects you to yield. I took a week off from work to let myself breathe, to wander the streets of Boston without an agenda or a deadline pressing at my back. In the small cafes where I'd spent so many afternoons buried in financial reports, I let myself sit and watch the world, feeling the weight of everything I'd survived begin to lift. I wore Grandma's sapphire earrings on those walks, a quiet reminder of her faith in me and the way she'd taught me to find beauty even in the hardest moments. When I returned to work, I was different. My colleagues noticed it in the way I carried myself, the steadiness in my voice when I presented to clients or negotiated deals. I didn't need to prove myself anymore, not to them, and certainly not to the family who had once tried to convince me I didn't belong. Grandma Matilda had seen my worth long before I ever did, and now finally I saw it too. In the months that followed, I used part of the settlement to establish the Matilda Bennett Memorial Scholarship at the library, where she had worked for 4 decades. Each year, it would help young women studying library science or literature, a living testament to the quiet power of knowledge and the belief that every voice deserves to be heard. I also began volunteering with a local women's shelter, teaching financial literacy classes to survivors of domestic abuse, women who, like me, had been told they didn't deserve to stand on their own. In their determination, I saw pieces of my grandmother's resilience, and I felt closer to her than ever. I'm sharing this final chapter of my story with you because I know how lonely it can feel to stand up for yourself, especially when it means standing apart from those you thought you could trust. Have you ever found the courage to speak your truth when the world tried to silence you? Have you ever felt the quiet triumph of reclaiming something that was always meant to be yours? I want to hear your story in the comments because every voice that speaks up adds another thread to the tapestry of women who refuse to be forgotten. And don't forget to subscribe. Your support is what keeps me telling these stories, and together we can create a space where no one's voice is ever lost. As the months passed, and the dust of legal documents and settlement payments slowly settled, I found myself thinking more and more about what it truly meant to honor Grandma Matilda's memory beyond the lines of inheritance and family conflict. Her careful planning had given me the foundation to stand on my own, but I knew that what she really wanted for me was so much bigger than just securing her estate. She wanted me to live freely, to build a life that was mine, unburdened by the weight of others' expectations or the need for their approval. With every monthly check that arrived, with every antique necklace or brooch that found its way back to my hands, I felt a quiet strength growing in me, a strength that didn't come from money or titles, but from the unwavering belief that I was enough just as I was. I used part of that inheritance to make a long-delayed dream a reality. Paris had always been a whispered promise between Grandma and me, a city she had loved in her books, and I had always longed to see with my own eyes. So one crisp October morning, I boarded a plane and let myself step into a world that was entirely mine. I wandered through cobblestone streets with a sense of wonder I hadn't felt in years, the language of a city that had seen centuries of heartbreak and hope swirling around me like music. In every cafe where I sipped espresso, in every museum where I stood before paintings that had outlasted empires, I felt closer to the quiet resilience she had taught me to nurture in the hidden corners of my heart. But Paris was more than just an escape. It was a declaration, a way of telling the world, and maybe more importantly, telling myself that my worth was never tied to whether my family approved of me or not. It was in the small joys of choosing for myself, in the quiet satisfaction of knowing that I was living a life Grandma Matilda would have been proud of. When I came back home, I brought that quiet confidence with me, wearing it like a second skin that no one could take away. Back in Boston, I poured that newfound energy into my work. My colleagues noticed the shift in me, the steadiness in my voice during presentations, the way I didn't shrink back anymore from taking up space in boardrooms filled with people who still believed success had a certain look, a certain name. I let go of the need to please everyone, and in doing so, I found a kind of freedom that felt as intoxicating as any Parisian sunrise. I no longer needed my family's permission to be who I was or to claim what I had earned. Their attempts to silence me had only made my voice stronger. In the evenings, I found solace in the small acts of quiet rebellion that had once defined Grandma Matilda's life, brewing a perfect pot of tea, writing down my thoughts in a leather-bound journal, reading the books she once pressed into my hands. Each ritual was a promise to myself that I would never again let anyone make me feel small. When the settlement was finalized and the last payment was transferred, I didn't feel relief so much as resolve. Because by then, I understood that this was never just about money. It was about rewriting the story my family had tried to tell about me and about her. My mother still sends me the occasional text, tentative olive branches that feel as fragile as they are late. My father keeps his distance, preferring to pretend that the neat rows of numbers on a spreadsheet can erase the messy truth of what happened. And Henry, he remains silent, his absence more telling than any apology ever could be. I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive them, but I know this: I don't owe them that forgiveness. I don't owe them any more of myself than I choose to give. That too is part of the inheritance. Grandma left me the right to decide what parts of my story I want to share and what parts I will keep for myself. I'm telling you all of this now because I know how it feels to wonder if you're strong enough to stand up for what's yours, to question whether you're allowed to take up space in a world that tells you to stay small. So I ask you, have you ever had to fight for the pieces of yourself that others tried to take? Have you ever chosen to live boldly in the face of those who told you to be quiet? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your truth. And don't forget to subscribe. Your voice fuels this community, and together, we'll make sure every story is heard. I carried the lessons of that chapter with me, like a compass pointing me back to myself, a steady reminder that real inheritance isn't just measured in what you receive, but in how you use it to shape your own future. The sapphire earrings I wore to meetings became more than just jewelry. They were a promise to never doubt my voice again. The scholarship I funded in Grandma Matilda's name wasn't just a tribute. It was a declaration that every woman who dares to believe in herself deserves a chance to turn that belief into reality. As I moved forward, I noticed that my relationship with my parents was forever changed. My mother still tried to bridge the gap with careful pleasantries, while my father buried himself in the mechanics of payments and updates, never acknowledging the betrayal that had cracked our foundation. And Henry, with his easy charm turned to uneasy silence, was a ghost of the brother I'd once known. But the woman I had become no longer needed their approval or understanding to validate her worth. On quiet nights, I would sit by the window of my apartment, a cup of tea in hand, and remember the gentle authority in Grandma's voice when she taught me how to balance more than just numbers. She taught me how to balance strength and softness, how to hold the line even when the people you love try to erase it. I realized then that forgiveness isn't a gift you owe to others. It's a choice you make for yourself on your own terms. And sometimes it means walking away without looking back. This final chapter wasn't about revenge or retribution. It was about rewriting the story my family tried to force upon me and standing tall in the truth I fought so hard to protect. Grandma Matilda's legacy wasn't just her money or jewelry. It was the unshakable belief that I had the right to be seen, to be heard, and to build a life that was mine alone. I'm sharing this final part of my journey with you because I know I'm not alone. Have you ever had to rewrite the narrative others tried to write for you? Have you stood your ground and claimed the space that was yours? Share your story in the comments below. I want to hear how you found your voice. And don't forget to subscribe. Your voice helps me keep sharing these truths, and together, we'll keep building a community that refuses to be silenced. Wow.